Welcome back to Bonded by Metal podcast with Andrew McKay Smith and BaldHeaded Metal, yours truly. Today we got an interesting topic. We kind of came to this one together. The idea of, is this such thing as an objectively great band, or is there objectivity in music, or is it all subjective? Is it all personal preferences? And we're going to try to go free ball it a little bit more, and we go into every kind of which way and direction and see where it kind of takes us. And I'll be the gentleman. Andrew, I'm going to let you start right off and see kind of where your head is in this kind of question.
Yeah, thanks, mate. You picked a cracker of a subject for us to talk about on this installment of the show, because I'll tell a story quickly up front. Many years ago, decades ago, as a matter of fact, in the 90s, I was in a pub and I was myself and my mate, we had our band t-shirts on. I think I had an Iron Maiden t-shirt on or whatever I was wearing back then. Wouldn't have been unusual back then for me to be wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt anyway. And we saw a group of other metalheads, and you sort of congregate. This is pre-smartphone, so you meet people, you talk, this sort of thing. And we were talking about our favorite bands, and this guy, he didn't look very smart. I'll say that up front. He didn't look like a very smart guy. He had a Sepultura Roots t-shirt on, and I think I'd just seen Sepultura as they'd come through town with Derek and the band. First time they toured Australia with Derek and the band on the back of the album Against. Not bad, didn't mind it. Still don't mind what Sepultura do with Derek. It's not what it was with Max in it, let's face it, but
I agree.
Still a very good band. And Roots in particular, there's the story where they got Sepultura hired Ross Robinson. They used Korn's amps and they developed that sound. That sound
unique
that
kind of
on Roots. Yeah, it's very much, it is the Korn sound at the end of the day. So I remember talking to this fellow, and I think he might have been stoned as well. Anyway, chatting away, and I said, look, I simply prefer the earlier material because that's a material that I know a little bit better. Refuse, Resist, etc. Dead Embryonic Cells.
Beneath the Remains.
He became quite agitated. And he was going, no, man, the new stuff's better. It's heavier. And I'm like, heavier? Right, okay, heavier. I don't know about that. But whatever, it's all good. I think we were a few drinks into our evening. We were playing pool, and we both became a bit more assertive in our opinions, if you like. I didn't think anything more of it. About 10 minutes later or so, I remember just this massive shove, and like thinking, what the hell happened there? Like wasn't expecting it. This guy was trying to fight me. He was trying to fight me over my opinions.
Over a difference of opinion. Jesus Christ.
The difference of opinion. This is this guy, and his friend tried to calm him down. His mate apologized to me. This guy eventually apologized to me, but the night was over. We dispersed, we went our separate ways. But that tells you that opinions are very much rooted in people's psyche when it comes to this sort of music. And I did not say that Roots wasn't a decent album. Not my favorite album. It wasn't a decent album. I just said I preferred the earlier material. And I pointed out, I wasn't a huge fan of Korn, so I didn't really like the new direction they're going. I understood it because it was a commercial bonanza for Sepultura as well. So whether it was by strategy or design or just that's the direction they wanted to take the band. But this guy was not having a bar of it. For him, Roots was the first Sepultura album and therefore the best. And anybody else who disagreed with him deserved to try to fight. So that was my lone experience with being attacked by somebody over a difference of a musical opinion. I didn't even think it was that strong, but it just goes to show you how embedded in someone's just their thinking and their outlook, especially when we're metalheads and young too, don't have a lot of context of life. Probably I certainly didn't have a mortgage back then, still living at home. I think it was my parents' home. And I think this guy probably was as well. So they become very important to you. But is it that important? Get into a fight in a pub? Of course it isn't that important to get into a fight in a pub. But that's my one story where I can demonstrate or I can show that music, it's very important to people.
I had a similar experience, but I was the asshole. I didn't fight anybody. I didn't try to start a fight, but I was extremely in my own ways when I was younger. And I think that's part of being young. You're so sure of yourself. You think your opinions matter, and they do matter. They are formed on something, but at the same time, you don't have that life experience yet. and we tend to be so hard-headed about the way we feel. And the idea of objectivity, I'm actually going to point out, I think there is certain objectivity in music, but I would say the majority of it, just like you said, is subjective. And I've heard this from people who are older, who are experienced musicians, will tell me that this is the greatest band they hear. And then somebody right next to them will say, well, I hate this band. And they seem to be both knowledge-wise on the same plank, you know? I told you the story before we started this podcast, but I always hated because I've always had strong opinions about things. And I would say something like to my brother, I don't like Van Gogh. And he goes like, what do you mean you don't like Van Gogh? It's like he's one of the, one of the people in the art world that you should know. I'm like, no, I like Leonardo da Vinci. I just don't like the style of Van Gogh. I don't get it. Oh, that's because you're not knowledgeable enough. You're a little dumb. You don't understand. Like, no, I just have an opinion. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. It's my opinion, And as I grow older, and especially starting this channel, I've kind of opened my mind up a little bit and loosened up a little bit. I've actually started listening to bands that are typically never on my list ever, and just kind of opening myself up as I've gotten older. Because first of all, I think you might agree with this. You kind of get tired of certain things when you get older, and you want to experience something maybe different or come back to things you said no to. I don't know if you ever had that experience.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. The older you get, the less interested you are in pretenses, meaning certain airs and graces go out the window. You're no longer projecting an image the older you get, because
you're not he's not as extreme either, right? When you're a young person, you're very extreme.
Yeah. As people listening, if they've listened to the last few episodes, will know I grew up in an era where glam turned into grunge. Okay, and I remember having very strong feelings about some bands back then. It was ridiculous calling Stone Temple Pilots cock rock. I mean, they're a great band. But you get sort of stuck in a view, and it wasn't really about the band. It was about the people around me and not really liking some of them because they were Stone Temple Pilots fans. So I think your understanding and awareness of pretty much anything that is as subjective as your taste in music has got to do with a lot more than just the music, too. It's about what's going on in the environment around you from a social, economic perspective, even. And talking about the bands that we love, I would find it very difficult. The only thing I'll say, I would find it very difficult to understand if a metalhead said that they couldn't relate to or didn't like bands, the OG bands, the bands that fostered our genre: Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Iron Maiden, Deep Purple, yeah. Judas Priest. Okay, Motorhead. I'm not talking about Motorhead. I'm not talking about being a dyed-in-the-wool fan, because there's only one of those bands that I would classify myself as being a dyed-in-the-wool fan, and that's Iron Maiden. But having some awareness of the roots of the genre and the reason that music sounds the way it does. And the older you tend to get, the more open-minded you become. Hey, I might put on that Deep Purple album and just have it on in the background. Yeah, it sounds like 60s doo-wop, some of it. I get that. It definitely sounds a bit like that to me at times. And the recording techniques are nowhere near, production techniques are nowhere near what they are now. But it's about appreciating elements of that you hear in the music that you love and thinking, wow, that's giving me an opportunity to explore other musical styles that I wouldn't have gotten into had I not taken the time to listen to this stuff.
You jumped ahead a little bit. I was going to do the same. I was going to tell you the same kind of experience where at first I thought whatever I like is what I like. I don't have to appreciate anything else. And as I've gotten a little bit older, as my brother kind of corrected me in certain things, is I think there is a certain level of objectivity. Is you can't go past the fact when somebody has created a genre that wasn't there before. The guys who created death metal, thrash metal, the ones who were responsible for it. Even if you don't particularly like those bands and you like the newer style more, you have to give it up to them for creating the sound. They might not be as technically proficient. They might not be as better, songwriting might be very simple for its time, because as things progress, but you have to give them what they've done. And I'll even go to a place of Metallica. You have to give Metallica credit. What they've done with Black Album is put metal on the big map. People had to pay attention to heavy metal after the Black Album. And it puts so many new fans onto this genre of music that probably otherwise wouldn't have gotten into. In the modern world, like the ones I've been reacting to, The Warning, a lot of people probably who weren't into that style of music, into the harsh the sound of music, might be their gateway would be The Warning. And it happens so that they're extremely talented on top of that. So it's like, I think there is an objectivity. And I'll even say that, again, as I've gotten older, and it seems to be a common thread for me where I've changed a lot of my opinions because we changed so much from our 20s into 30s, 30s into 40s, is there is certain things. Van Gogh is important. I can say Van Gogh is important and I understand his importance, but I like this better.
Yeah.
And it's
I think
okay.
that's what it comes down to. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. And it's about having some awareness about where your personal preferences begin and end. Okay, so we're all going to be drawn towards certain bands. I've already mentioned Iron Maiden. Metallica's a great one. You brought them up. Loved Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets. Yeah, of course. Like so many people got into them around the Black Album.
Mm-hmm.
That was when I was 13 years of age or thereabouts. But and plenty of people in the boarding house I was in had those two albums, Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. Kind of ignored Black Album, but it gave me an opportunity to get into those two albums there. Have I listened to those two albums in decades? No, of course not. But they were very formative. Okay.
Yeah.
Do I wish Metallica these days would more or less hang up the boots and go off and go to their golf courses and Northern California ranches? Yeah, a little, because they take up a lot of oxygen, and that's just an observation on how much the music media pays attention to just about any time James Hetfield or Lars Ulrich has anything to say. It's like whoosh, all makes blabbermouth, loud wire, metal injection, metal sucks, all of those sorts of clickbaity sites. They just light up, and you see the reactions that they get. There's thousands of reactions that they get.
Yeah.
But is that an issue to do with those clickbait sites, or is that just what people want to read and listen to?
I mean, people know who Metallica is. I think that's part of it. Their popularity demands it. Whereas something happened to, I don't know, Creator, most people are like, who? Some people don't even know who they are.
Yeah, I've talked about that on the podcast a lot. It's people aren't curious. That people want things handed to them on a platter. Like Metallica, they want the bands to just sort of be there in front of them. It's even hardcore music fans can be a bit like that. It's not like that for me. I always sort of went, well, Metallica's there. Okay, what's the yin to that yang? It's Megadeth. Okay, I'll start with Megadeth, and I'll go even deeper. And
what's on the periphery, right? Like what's on the periphery? That's not what's in front of me. What are these things on the sides that might fill in that void that Metallica might not?
Yeah, and metal's a fantastic genre for that. Metal and punk, maybe. I mean, I don't know much about punk, but we'll talk about metal. Metal is probably the best genre for that because we're wired that way as fans for some reason. I think that's one of the big attractions to the genre. I mean, look at all of the underground cult black metal acts. There are so many of them, even new ones that come out now that sound like as though they're Mayhem in 1989. But they're brand new outfits, one-man outfits from Ohio or Perth or something. They're coming out and people have gone, right, that's the niche. That's the key there, the key word. I want to get into that niche genre and go for it. And it just seems to be about reflecting of someone's personality, the music, especially when they're artists themselves and the fans dive into it. One of the weird things about metal that I find is that it's a musician's genre, and I often find that it's rare for me to meet a metal fan who isn't also a fan of guitars, basses, drums, that sort of thing as well. So it's all sort of caught up in it.
I'll say something. I was gonna say this right now, and you said at the perfect time. I had one comment where I didn't particularly. I reacted to 2 songs in a row. I liked one song and didn't like the other. And the comment was like, well, I think I like, no offense to you, but I think that you don't like this because you might be a little bit basic. Do you play guitars or drums? And that kind of not pissed me off, but like, dude, I don't have to play guitar or drums to see talent or to see where somebody plays well or somebody's a good musician or somebody is not that good of a musician. I don't necessarily have to be a guitar. You have a deeper appreciation, I think. You'll have a much deeper appreciation for what it is. But that particular comment made me actually come up with this whole topic, because why can't I just not like it? Why could it be great music and I go, this is not for me? And that's where it ends. Why does it have to go to the place where you don't know what you're talking about grammatically? It's like, if
Yeah,
you don't like
yeah.
this, you must not know, like jazz. If you do not like jazz, you must not like music. No, I like blues. I like classic rock. I like what jazz has influenced. You just don't like jazz.
Yeah, I've heard that argument come up a few times. And I've got to say up front, anybody that accuses anybody of not being able to relate to music because they're not a musician is a fool. Now, okay, I like aeroplanes. I like motor cars. Am I a mechanic? No. Okay, do I understand the inner workings? No. I mean, I spend hours in my own time so busy with everything. You go to bed, we all do it. You go on your iPhone. We're talking off camera before about I'm a student of history. Well, I'm also a student of technology and engineering. So I like understanding the underlying mechanics that make planes work, airplanes work, because it fascinates me. Do I understand? Of course not. I watch it and then I'm like, well, I'm not mechanically minded. So bang, it goes down. Okay. Do I understand the physics? Is that the right word? Is it the physics that allows an airplane to fly up in the air?
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
but do
yeah.
I appreciate that it can do it? Yeah, of course I do. And I think we all fall into that category. But well, many of us fall into that category. But anybody who accuses someone like yourself who has an awareness of music, of not having a deeper appreciation in music because you don't understand the underlying mechanics, a la you're not a musician's an idiot. And I think, yeah, that's sorry, I can't. That's hey, there's my non-objective fact, my non-objective opinion right there, because music is it's all personal taste and it enhances our lives. And you shouldn't have to have a reason for liking or not liking certain types of music.
And then, another question that comes up to in this whole idea of objectivity is sales. And I feel
Mm.
like we have the same feeling on this. And, a lot of people go, well, man, they're popular, they're selling a lot. So that's part of their greatness. And I would say that, their sales for me a lot of times have nothing to do with it. Limp Bizkit sold a lot. Limp Bizkit probably sold with one
Oh
record
God.
more than metal bands will sell their whole careers, or Kid
Whole
Rock.
genres. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, so does that make him amazing? No, I don't think Limp Bizkit, even though I like Limp Bizkit songs, I will admit, I don't think he's is an artist. He should have been faded out into obscurity. Why isn't Cannibal
Oh,
Corpse making well, Cannibal Corpse I can understand. They're a little bit extreme. But there's a less extreme examples. Sabotage. Why isn't Sabotage a household name?
great example. Yeah.
It's like, why aren't they mentioned on every single person's list when we're talking about traditional metal or power metal? Why do they have to be this obscure band? There's so many great bands out there nobody will ever hear about because the studio does not want to push it, because they're a risk, because they might not do anything new, but they're actually good in their genre.
Chris Oliva, long passed away. He died about 30 years ago, but one of the
Yeah.
greatest guitarists in heavy metal. Yet you ask the average metal fan if they know Sabotage. They might have heard the band name, sure, but do they know Sabotage? And by extension, who's Chris Oliva? They won't be able to tell you. That's not a problem. I'm not even suggesting for a moment that's a problem. Transversely, the deification of those who have since passed on, Cliff Burton, Randy Rhoads, okay, everybody
Yeah.
knows who they are. Is it because they're better than Chris Oliva? Bullshit. Sorry, I mean this has been the issue that I've had with metal fans for a long time. It's Randy this, Randy that, what have you. Like, I've
Camps.
spoken to I've spoken to Bob Daisley, who was in Ozzy's band, who wrote the songs alongside of Randy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great musician. Okay, does he deserve two albums? I think there might have been one or two Quiet Riot albums in there, but the albums that he's known for are the two Ozzy albums. Does he deserve to be placed in that dais? That's an opinion based fact of the matter thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
meaning okay, yeah, Randy's a great player, but Chris Oliva has since passed on too. Okay, so why aren't they somewhere near it, especially if metal fans pride themselves on not being trend driven and getting into music for music's sake, this sort of thing? That's the one thing that I never really quite understood, actually, was why Chris Oliva wasn't on more of a pedestal, simply because people's proclivity to put people on a dais after they passed on is so strong these days. Look at Churchill Dina.
I mean, yeah, that's a good name, but I think a lot of it actually has to do with we claim not to be picking camps. We claim not to do certain things, and I think even you and I still on the subconscious level do it when we don't want to, when we think we should be more open-minded, when we know better. We still tend to act in that way because, if, for example, if people ask this question, why do we have the need to put everything into subgenres in heavy metal? Why do we have the need to box somebody into they're playing death metal, great, why do we have the need to do that? I think it's psychologically comfortable to do that. I think it creates a certain level of comfort that, oh, I know what this is and I know where to put it, and when I want this, I will open this box and take it out.
Yeah, the genre thing's interesting. I understand why there's a bit of a need to do it because it's a marketing thing. I don't know I don't know if fans these days are really all of that motivated. Oh, I'm a black metal fan, so therefore I'm just going to sort of stick to bands that self-identify as black metal. I think genres are important simply because if you want to do a deep dive, okay, they're sort of all loosely grouped into an area or subgenre or subcategory somewhere. But I certainly, the way that I listen to things these days, I could give less of a shit these days about genres and categories. It's usually more about record labels and how easy they are to deal with. It's a completely different profile, if you like.
Okay.
But just
I think it helps, like you said. I think it's a good way to, at the very least, initiate, so you have some understanding what you're getting yourself into, and then kind of open your mind up to what it might be and what differences it can bring.
Yeah. It's even talking to Steve DiGiorgio, the all-time greatest bass player in heavy metal, and he was in Death. He was Chuck Schuldina's bass go-to for a entire decade. Even if he didn't plan all of the albums, he certainly did the guide tracks and helped Chuck conjure those songs into the absolute, killer tunes they became. And he said, look, back then, there's no way. Back when Chuck was alive, he didn't say nobody cared. He just said that they weren't playing anywhere. The popularity has exploded since his death.
Yeah.
Okay.
It added to it.
Yeah, and I think people are very nostalgic. People dive into nostalgia, don't they? They get very, which was really strange. From one part of me looked at the whole explosion of Chuck Schuldina and death after his passing as very kind of morbid in some respects. Okay, because people sort of they look into things that might not be there. Chuck was a very complicated fellow.
Yeah,
and I know that because I've spoken to many of his bandmates. And Gene Hoglan, when I spoke to Gene, he was telling me, what was his quote? Things that bothered you, things that wouldn't necessarily bother you or I, really bothered Chuck. Very, very complicated guy.
Yeah, okay. Sensitive perhaps as well.
Very extremely sensitive, clearly. Yeah. Cam Lee even told me that he more or less got kicked out of the band because of a dispute. It was a dispute over a girl, but it actually started over cereal, of all things. Because Chuck's mum gave, I don't know what Apple Jacks are. I assume they're some sort of a cereal anyway. I know they're a cereal because I Googled it after we were having a conversation, but Cam told me that he stayed over at Chuck's house one day. Chuck's a bit of a mummy's boy, and Chuck's mum gave Cam the last of the Apple Jacks, and when Chuck woke up and he wanted the Apple Jacks, he went into a blind, rage. He would, because there were no Apple Jacks left, and it really put he and Cam off on a bad foot that they never recovered from, which is crazy. But this is because I enjoy having these conversations and get right in behind it, so I actually get an understanding of the personality. But the fans don't do that. They go, I like this genre of music. I'm going to buy the T-shirt with Chuck on it. And God knows I've done it myself, so I'm not criticizing anybody who does that. And then I'm going to go along with this cult now that has Chuck up on this huge pedestal. Up on this dais.
And then there's a guy, what's the guy from Mayhem, the main guy? Oh my God.
Euronymous?
He came out, it's one of the living members. He basically came out and said, oh, what do you think of death? He's like, fuck Chuck Schuldiner. He's like, why? Because he ruined death metal and what it stood for. Because to him, he softened it. He made it something different. Even within musicians, within bands within the same genre, they have this kind of, I think, misunderstandings of each other.
All those
And
guys in Mayhem are a bit crazy, but yeah.
yeah.
That's their opinion. Yeah, I can't remember the bassist. What's his name? I can't. I'm not a massive Mayhem fan. I've got to
I'm
say.
not a fan at all. That's why I don't know. I only know Euronymous because I did research on them. I never liked them ever personally.
Great drummer. Hellhammer's a magnificent drummer, but outside of that, the music is. I actually just a quick story for everybody. I actually did crewing for Mayhem when they came to Brisbane. I actually ended up buying there. Everybody who thinks that the black metal bands are smearing themselves with goat's blood and stuff backstage, I can tell you, it ain't happening. They're having their cheeses, their dried apricots, their orange juices. It's very, very normal in 2000 and well, it was back in 2018, I think it was. But yeah, it's people. It's so rare to meet people now who are so rooted in thinking one way or another. It was so common when I was growing up, though. It was
I
so
don't
very
know.
common.
I'm taking it at face value on YouTube when I'm hearing some of these reactions when I say, because I always start my videos with this idea of like, hey guys, I might dislike something, I might like something, but it should open up a doorway to conversation, and we can disagree. But there's some people that come out that will come out like they think they're not coming out harshly, but it's like like a pot shot at you. It's like you're just basic. Well, you don't know any better, or he's like it goes like, oh, I get you don't like this. That's usually my response at this point. Like, oh, you don't like it? I'm surprised. I thought you would have liked it.
Mm.
Boom, and that's where it ends because now I realize you can show me the most technical band. Well, that might not want to hear that technical band. I might want to hear AC/DC because they just have really addictive riffs and chords and everything in their songs. I might not want to hear that. Another day, you might show me another band. I'm like, well, they're a bit simplistic because for that moment in time, my mood, my feelings, I want to hear something more complex. And it's just our moods affect so much of how we feel about music, I think.
Yeah, really great comment. The moods do affect it. People just aren't aware of themselves, I think, to an extent either. They don't understand that they have a proclivity for certain things, and that's all rooted in social outlook and even environmental factors, where we're from, how we grew up, this sort of thing. But we've spoken about this occasionally. We both get shitheads on our YouTube
It's
on our
occasionally. Yeah,
YouTube
I think most of the
channels.
time, I think most
It's
people are very
rare.
respectful.
It's very rare, and let's face it, it's very rare. But what was the last one that I had? I was talking to Nick Barker from Cradle of Filth. I was on YouTube, and a bloke said, "You're a fucking fanboy who has no idea, whatever." My simple response is delete. You know, if you want to have an opinion, put some thought into it. Put some thought into it. If you're going to come on and shit post or troll behind a burner account, fuck off.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's whether you want to call that subjective or objective, either which way, that's just my own personal rules and take on things. 99.9% of people are extremely respectful. They want to have a debate, but they want to have a debate and a conversation as best as you can over YouTube. And you can. The good thing about YouTube is in the comments sections. I don't know whether it's unlimited characters, but you can certainly have quite a long conversation using a couple of thousand words maybe. I've certainly had a few of them on my channel with people.
Yeah.
I know you're not a massive Cradle of Filth fan. I'm not these days either, but back in the 90s, I certainly was. And that's where my love of that band begins and ends. It was about 1999 from the Cradle to Enslave EP. Everything after that, I haven't paid almost any attention to. I've certainly listened to some of it, but it doesn't really do anything for me. Do people disagree with me on that? Of course they do, but they do so in a way that we're able to do here,
Yes,
which is just talk about
100%.
things. Just chat. We're normal people. Just have a chat about things.
I gotta say though, and I'll use myself as an example. There is an idea of when you are used to certain kind of people. Like me and my brother talk to each other very harshly. And when I created this YouTube channel, in the first like 30, 40 videos, I realized this might not be the best way to approach people because they don't know me. They don't know that I don't mean some of the things that I say. They don't know my context. So you have
Yeah.
to hold back a little bit and explain yourself better. And as a matter of fact, I do credit a lot of people on this channel for opening my mind up to music that I otherwise wouldn't have listened to, because they've taught me also, some of them are older than me, some of them might be more experienced in music, just to slow down a little bit, take a step back, and at the very least appreciate what you're hearing. You don't have to like it, but you can appreciate it. And on occasion, I just, like I did a Japanese band, they're talented. Don't get me wrong. As musicians, they're talented. Just didn't like it.
Yeah. And here's the thing, you're allowed to not like certain bands, songs, music, genre. That's the whole point of it. Music is not an essential ingredient to our survival as a human species. I hate to break it to people. Okay. Food, oxygen, water, social contact, all essential. Music, well, music to an extent, but there are plenty of cultures, a la North Korea, where they don't even have music. Or there's certainly, it's a very limited type of music. It's all pre-approved by the grand dictator there, the great dictator there. But yeah, I know what you're talking about there. If people heard the conversations that I have to have in my place of work compared to the conversations I have to have here with you, mate, they're dark side of the moon compared to the moon side of the moon we can actually see. You bring a different aspect of your personality into things.
You know what it is too? It happened with clients. I when I first became a trainer, the one way you had to get clients is walk on the floor of a gym and literally approach people and perhaps fix up their form, try to help them with something. And you quickly realize, first of all, people don't like to be corrected,
Yeah.
and people don't want unsolicited information that they're not ready for. And it became such an art to how do you come up to people and express yourself in such a way that they'll actually listen to you. Again, they don't have to agree. They don't have to sign up with me. This guy doesn't have to listen to the band that I propose on my top 5 albums of all time. But at the very least, they'll be more susceptible to the information and just be like, oh, I know where you're coming from with this. And oh, I actually like this band, but the other one bands on your list are not on mine. And then my response was, what is your list? Let me see. Let's exchange it. It's some of the most fun I've had with friends who were actually metalheads is exchanging just what we like. Because among the things where there's differences, we're bound to find alike.
Yeah, I the way I grew up, nobody around me was into heavy metal, especially extreme metal. Forget about heavy metal, extreme metal, Carcass, Napalm Death, this sort of stuff, Deicide, Morbid Angel, the bands I was trending toward. So I just listened to it by myself. Didn't even look like a metalhead when I was going through school and when I left high school. And so when it would come up in conversations, of course, it would come up. I mean, I'd be attacked, not physically, but those shit music, you're a dickhead, oh, you're never going to get a girlfriend if you listen to this music, all of this sort of garbage. And
Oh, you listen to satanic music? Yeah.
oh, well, that old chestnut. Or yeah, okay. So I remember one night having to defend myself. Like, the people's perception of this music was Deicide, that's like Marilyn Manson. I'm like, oh. Well, they were, this individual was having a dig at me over my appreciation of heavy metal, but their whole point was about Marilyn Manson. I'm like, I don't care about Marilyn Manson. Okay,
See,
I could care less.
I will disagree with you because I like what he did. I like how he disrupted and just put a nail into everybody and completely. I think he had the spirit of heavy metal. I'll tell you this much. He didn't have the music of heavy metal, but he had the spirit of it just to fuck with people, almost like Cannibal Corpse did.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, his subversive character, and I've seen him live. I saw him live back in '97. One of the best shows I've ever seen. Just can't listen to the music. I've got it on. It's just weird sub electro rock
Yeah.
stuff, and I much prefer Rob Zombie if I'm going to listen to that sort of thing, or Ministry if you're going to go down that pathway. Yeah, he's got talent. I've spoken to John Five, Michael Beanhorn, who was his producer on Mechanical Animals. Talented guy, deadly serious in the studio. I can tell people that does not fuck around. I know he's known for fucking around, but he doesn't in the studio. He actually takes the music very seriously. Clearly got some other things going on within his own life these days. And historically, he's had, with Evan Rachel Wood and the things that have come out there with the Me Too movement. And I suspect there's been way too much drug use. That's the issue with drug use. It's not like a train you get off at a different station at, meaning that you don't arrive at a certain point in your life and go, well, I've been doing drugs up to this point. Now I'm going to stop doing them. The drugs have got a hold of you.
Yeah.
He sang it best. Marilyn saying, the drugs, I don't like the drugs, but the drugs like me. He was almost predicting his future in some respects there, wasn't he? There's that infamous footage of him at the 2012 Soundwave where he's trying to do coke. I think he sniffed coke and the coke's flying off into the breeze. Because he's fat then. So I think he still is. He's really obese. he looks like Jabba the Hutt or something. And he's trying in his black lycra and smeared makeup, and he's trying to grab the coat that's flying off. Point with Marilyn is, I understand he's had an impact. It's I might have been one of the first people in Australia to actually own Antichrist Superstar, because is that the album back then? The big
I think
one
so.
with the beautiful people on it. Anyway, because I got an ex-record company copy from a secondhand from an industry record store, one in Sydney, Red Eye Records, where you could buy the ones that were given to record companies before they were given to the general public. So I got it weeks before it came out. Same with Tool. Back then you could do that sort of stuff. But mate, it's I think objective versus subjective, it all comes down to all of the things we've spoken about, what you naturally gravitate toward without any influence from media, friends, family, whatever it might be, the moods that you're in, what also whether or not you've got what your baseline level of intelligence is.
I was going to ask you a question, maybe not along lines of intelligence, but this idea of, do you believe there's a certain level of objectivity where how do I put it? For example, somebody presents a band to you and objectively they are on a different level musically. And that somebody is just either not nuanced enough or not able to understand this kind of thing. Like for example, it's like, oh, he hasn't heard a lot of rock music, so he doesn't know any better. Do you believe in that kind of thing? Or it's still just like, hey, even if he doesn't understand, he still kind of has this? Because I feel like there's a part of me, and I fall under that bracket sometimes when it comes to jazz. I just don't understand it. I understand like mechanically what's happening in the music, but it just doesn't, there's not that click. The light switch doesn't go up for me, and does it make me somehow less knowledgeable about this genre of music, or is just a taste and preference?
Okay, so a couple of points in there. Your baseline understanding of something does form your objective perspective. Okay, so if all your awareness of metal is Metallica, then your objective perspective is going to be very different from, say, yours and mine. And the vast majority of people who listen to music, their baseline objective of rock and metal music would be Metallica, because it's the most prominent. Okay. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't necessarily call them rock and metal fans. You just say that's what they understand it. If you said, gosh, I've done this in the past, I'd say people say, oh, I've heard of death metal, but give me an example. I say, well, Metallica, just take Metallica's music, down tune it, and put really gruff vocals on it. And then you've got something that resembles Deicide or Morbid Angel, what have you. And they go, oh, I think I understand. Yeah, I think I get it. Of course, that's nothing like what it sounds like, but that's the closest that I'm going to get someone who has that objective perspective from the perspective of Metallica to understand extreme metal. Okay. But if I said that to you, you'd say that's ridiculous. Okay. Yeah. you're trying to, it all comes down to trying to get people to relate to what you're into. Okay. The subjective side of it comes into, do you like Morbid Angel or do you like Mayhem?
Okay. Yeah. Which one's better to you? Exactly.
Yeah. The subjective side of it is just which one you tend to listen to more than another. And for me, that would be, I just used it, far more Morbid Angel than Mayhem. Okay.
I also think,
objective side of it. You go.
You know what else happens in this kind of thing? Is just, you made me think about it as well, is this idea of, this happened to me personally. When I got into music first as a kid, it was like Michael Jackson pop and classic rock. That's what my father raised me on. Then my cousins introduced me to like light heavy metal, like Metallica, Motley Crue, and all these kinds of glam bands. And as I started getting into it, where you start picking your own choices, you pick your music. For me, there was just a natural progression. Okay, I'm listening to a lighter side of thrash and kind of traditional metal. Next thing you know, I'm into heavier thrash. Next thing you know, I'm into death metal. And it's with time, as I see myself kind of wanting to expand this sound that I like, I started getting into more and more extreme music. When I hear some people that tell me that I've never got into black metal or death metal, that always signifies to me, not that they're not knowledgeable, but they just weren't that into heavy metal in the first place. Because I feel like any fan who's really into heavy metal is going to get to a point where they're really kind of picking from every genre. But they, like for example, I don't pick a lot from power metal, but I like power metal. I might not like too much of neoclassical, but there are instances where I like neoclassical because now you have this breadth of things that you enjoy, which have become more extreme and which become that keep that kind of simpleness as well to it as like in the beginning.
Mm. Look at Eddie Trunk, probably the world's most famous rock and metal fan.
Yeah.
Probably couldn't name more than a handful of extreme metal bands. Doesn't he's on record as saying he does not listen to death metal, extreme metal, black metal, grindcore. He heaviest he goes is bands like Anthrax, if I'm not mistaken. And I find that really unusual.
Yeah, me
Okay, I
too.
know he came up in a very different era than you and I did. He came up in an era where Kiss. He's a massive Kiss fan. From memory, you're not a Kiss fan either.
No,
Neither
no,
am I.
I love Kiss.
Oh, you do love Kiss, yeah. I've tried, believe me. My God, have I tried? Even bought vinyls that I've ended up giving away. But but for Eddie Trunk not to be curious and dive into some of those, he can do whatever the hell he wants. Let's face it. But as in his position to not want to dive deeper, and Bill Steer, as far as I'm concerned, is the equal to any of the guitarists that he puts in a pedestal. Okay, any of those glam bands, who have these so-called shredders or what have you, Bill Steer is the equal, both from a talent perspective and from an artistic perspective. You can listen to Bill do his Les Paul thing all day.
Yeah.
So that's one way that I'd say to somebody, if someone is looking for an entry point into extreme metal and they love metal for the guitars, have a listen to the soloists in extreme metal. Have a listen to guys like Bill and Ralph Santola. These are all time guys for me. And these are some of the reasons I actually get right into the music. But yeah, as I say, mate, it all comes down to your objective perspective, then your subjective opinion on which bands you like and get into. There's no right or wrong reason. We've spoken about Marilyn Manson, who somehow gets called heavy metal by non-metal fans, which is crazy. But
And tours with
yeah.
heavy metal bands. He toured with like Slayer and Lamb of God.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes sense. It makes sense. Look, it's a similar fan base. It tends to be. I always saw Marilyn Manson as like girl music. A lot of chicks get into Marilyn Manson, and if
Especially
that
the
was
rise
enough.
of goths in the 90s.
Yeah, the whole goth thing. It's very. Well, you and I aren't goths clearly, but the whole goth thing is very Edgar Allan Poe, isn't it? It's very it's never made a lot of sense because, well, there you go, there's an objective perspective. If somebody out there wants to educate me on the world of goths, but someone who really knows about that stuff, not just someone who's into the hot topic version of it,
Yeah.
hit me up. But I've certainly listened to bands like Christian Death, so-called goth metal, like what's that New York band, Pete Steele, Typo Negative.
See, I wasn't into them.
Great band. It's just you got to be in a certain mood. It's got as if it gets very cold around me, but cold, raining, red wine, this sort of thing, and you've got to sort of maybe be a bit maudlin and a bit in that way in a mood. It's not the sort of music I want to put on to. It's not the sort of music I'm going to put on in the car. Put it that way.
And then I want to kind of open this up also to any of the listeners here. Is what's been your experience with music? How do you feel about this whole subject of objectivity? Do you believe there's a such thing as being objective, or it's all subjective? And when it comes to music, is there an understanding of certain things that objectively you have to recognize when it comes to music or historically that have happened? I would love to hear kind of your opinions on this topic in general. If you have anything to criticize what we say, I love that as well, because it just creates conversation. And I want to make sure I give the closing statement to you as well, Andrew. If you have anything last thing to say, what I was going to add. My last story here is my recent discovery of a band. I've never listened to Whitechapel, and I decided to check out the last album. I listened to the album from front to the back, and the whole time I was impressed. And I left with is I don't never want to listen to this again. I don't know how to explain it to you. Not my thing. Not my thing. I didn't enjoy the singing because when the singing came in with the harsher vocals, it just didn't fit for me. And the music is great. I don't want to listen to it ever again. I can't explain it to you. And I think this is the point, kind of the thing that we're trying to talk about the whole time. That's the idea of subjectives. Like sometimes I can't explain it to you. I don't have a logical reason or a specific thing that I can, it's just at the end of the album, I was like, you know what? This was great. If I never listen to this again, it's fine. I don't have no feeling like I need to go into a discography right now and check out more. But musically, man, they can fucking play.
Well, you know what my final statement would be, just to illustrate the point for everybody listening and watching, I should say. Objectively, Black Sabbath, they're the OGs. All of their catalog has something in it for everybody. Subjectively, I much prefer Dio. I think that summarizes what we're talking about. There you go.
And there, my sir, I completely agree with you. You have
Another good one.
another good one, man. You have a good one and take care.
Thanks, brother.